Hello, this is Richard Pearce from Finextra TV, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Nick Ogden, who in this role today we're talking about, you're the CEO of RTGS Global. Nick, hi, how are you today?
I'm very well, Richard. How are you?
Very well. I'm sure people probably have followed this series of interviews we've done. Last time we were chatting at Cybos a while ago, and obviously you and I worked together closely at ClearBank. And to declare an interest, I'm still running a few lines between you and Microsoft, even though I've left Microsoft now. But what we wanted to talk about today was what's the update on RTGS, and of course, for those that haven't been following, what is it? What are you up to now, Nick?
Okay, but in a nutshell, basically, we've built a new method of basically securing and transmitting international payments based around the use of liquidity. And so what effectively we've constructed, and when we met in Cybos last year in London, our techies were, deep in the bunker, so to speak, building this technology. They've now completed that. And what effectively RTGS does is it enables us to make sure banks have got money before a transaction occurs. Now that might seem incredibly simple and something one would have assumed has happened ordinarily before, but believe me or not, it didn't, right? And so what effectively we've done is we've built a very, very sophisticated system which checks interbank liquidity, confirms the liquidity, locks the liquidity for the beneficiary banks, and when they agree to do a transaction, the transaction takes place in 50 milliseconds. So it's instantaneous. And what it does is it changes the ownership, the beneficial ownership of the funds securely, and it's replicated in what we call synthetic central bank money. So what this means is that it's real money tied back to central bank reserves, so the transaction's immutable. Now, there are many benefits of this for both businesses and consumers in basically having access to faster, very, very fast payments via their institutions globally. For example, you could send a payment from America to Australia in 50 milliseconds on a Sunday, done. And the benefits of that are clear. The benefits for banks are tremendous because they can actually start to deliver service levels to their customers. So as opposed to the normal, question that a business owner will have to his bank, can you tell me when the money will arrive, or can you tell me where the money is? And the same for consumers. They know that it will be there within a very, very short period of time, way less than a minute, which is faster than anything that anybody's experiencing currently. And the other benefits for banks, we believe, are there's some capital savings in relation to the construct of the accounts that we've created. And we're working with a number of groups now globally in relation to those discussions. And quite interesting, the Bank of International Settlements produced a report about 5 weeks ago, which Sir John Cunliffe, who's one of the deputy governors at the Bank of England, is the author of, or the promoter of, effectively saying that what was required were some fundamental changes in the way that international payments were undertaken. And by an absolute coincidence, what they're saying and what we're doing dovetails together. So it's, right place, right time opportunity. And so where we've got to now is the tech works. We're into stage 1. We've been working with your old firm, Microsoft, as you know.
My old firm, that would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And we've got to an interesting moment today as the announcement, which I think you've seen, sort of explains.
Yeah, so just before we go on to that, tell us a bit more. So the idea, I think you've brought across very clearly, and obviously, the benefits of that. But people might ask, in terms of executing that operationally, engaging with, central banks, commercial banks, etc., globally, that sounds like an epic journey. Have you done that epic journey? Have you actually got into the operational phase as well as, obviously, we're talking about some technical elements?
Oh yeah, after I saw you in Cybos last year, I jumped on a plane and stayed on it for 3 months, basically traveling around the planet. So we've engaged with regulators all over the world and commercial banks, because there's a difference between having an idea and actually having people accept the idea and allow you to take it to market. So, we've had discussions from the World Bank, IMF, down through to regulators in North America, Canada, Caribbean, Africa, right the way across the world, down, right the way down, obviously to Australia and New Zealand. And so if you like, the preliminary work that we needed to do to ensure that the market existed was there. The challenge that we then got is to operationally how we sync this into the various different institutions. Because whilst money is money, the way that banks deal with money is different between each and every bank. And so what we're now doing is working with a number of groups. UK Finance are being highly supportive towards us in relation to providing their Treasury Liquidity Management group to discuss the operational complexities of this with us. And we're now moving into the testing phase in relation to technology, the operational interlink into that to make sure that there are any operational nuances. Frankly, we understand. We're not trying to set rules that people have to fit to. What we're trying to do is to understand all the rules and come up with a status quo which will work for the majority of the banks that we work with, that we're talking to. There will be some uncertain foibles, but c'est la vie. And that process is now running. And the second part of that is called stage 1 on our extranet, if you get to that. Stage 2 is then the technical integration of that, which I guess we'll talk about in a bit, before commercial rollout in 2021.
Fantastic. So that is the perfect cue. So today's announcement, you're talking about that technical aspect and some work you've done with Microsoft. Tell us a bit more.
You know that we work with Microsoft extensively when we're building ClearBank. And so developed an incredible relationship and very supportive relationship during that time, which has continued on with RTGS Global. When we started to look at what we wanted to achieve with RTGS Global, there was the usual considerations of cybersecurity and all the rest of it, but we wanted blistering speed and transactional volume. We wanted to be able to do 30,000 plus transactions a second, multiplied by 180 currency corridors, with each transaction taking circa 50 milliseconds. Now, scaling that, right, and doing that globally is really very, very difficult, and wouldn't really have been possible, I don't think, a couple of years ago. The technology, the way that networks work, the way that cloud computing works. We're 6 years into learning about cloud computing, only 6 years. And so a lot of the technologies didn't exist. We were very, very fortunate in the way that Microsoft had engineered Azure as almost a private internal network. So what we then found that we could get these point-to-point speeds that we were seeking securely. And then we were able to build a system, a very, very resilient system, which basically we were happy with. And equally, the team at Microsoft, who have been working with us now since the beginning of this year, were able to test and emulate that in Redmond to make sure that what we were trying to do from a technical perspective, they were comfortable with in relation to how we were deploying it within Azure. So there's been a great partnership, great learnings on both sides in relation to how all of that worked. And during that process, we wanted to deal with the how the hell do we install the software challenge. Because, how do you take this stuff to market is always the issue. How do we get it installed? And where we got to, and the announcement we're making today with Bill Bowden and the guys at Microsoft, is that we've now got to a point where the RTGS containers, which is the technology which banks use to connect to our infrastructure, is going to be available within the Azure marketplace. That's the same as buying a new PC, installing Office, and setting it up and running it. And so what we've done is we've dealt with the capability of getting the installation done easily. And we've also pre-configured that installation. There are about 44,000 banks in the world. And what we've done within our own directory systems and identification systems is now create that containerization structure for every bank that effectively could connect to the RTGS network. What we've announced today is the fact that that work's complete. We're now moving forward during the autumn into stage 2, which is starting to deploy this technology in, whilst we continue with the operational learnings that are going on with the various regulators, commercial banks, and other organizations that we're talking to globally about the impact of the RTGS Global project.
Fantastic. So you've got that distribution connection point there. Yep. It's kind of open banking writ large, isn't it, really, in a way?
It is. It is.
And the next steps, you touched on a few there, but what can we expect next in the next unfolding episode of this conversation?
Well, we're working with a number of organizations. I think one of note is PwC, who most people will know about. And we're working with them in relation to their involvement with a number of the world's major banks. in relation to pulling together quite a complex use case. Obviously, I can't tell you who the banks are at this stage, it's confidential, but that's going to be really interesting how that works. Because the speed of performance that we can achieve on this network is something that the banks haven't ever seen before. And so we're getting quite a lot of, can it do this? Could it do that? Will it do this? Responses back. And so working with some of the biggest banks in the world, as we are already in discussions with, is really going to throw back some good solid testing, which is what you need in a project at this stage, to actually flush out both challenges and opportunities. They're probably.
And you've effectively got a sort of sandbox, haven't you, so that people can do scenario testing in a way that allows them to do some of that scenario playing that you spoke about.
That's correct. It's when you come up with a new technology, people say, "What's it look like?" And you say, "Well, it looks like this." And they say, "Ah, okay." And then what does it do? And you say, "Well, it does this." And they say, "Oh, that's really great. Can we do it?" And often the response to that is, "Perhaps." What we've done is said, and actually, no, you've got to be able to do that. You've got to be able to understand how atomic settlement, which is what this system is all about, running on an ISO 222 network. You've got to understand how that works, see how it works, and test it out. So we've created a sandbox environment which effectively allows the banks to effectively gamificate their practice of the RTGS global environment, just like the real live network, but it's within a sandbox environment. And it allows them to test transactions, test liquidity, and all the rest of it against different, theoretical banks within a network. What they can then do is extend that out so they can use it interbank within their own bank or within their existing correspondent network, so they can really see for themselves how this technology works rather than just relying on a PowerPoint and hope.
Yeah, I think that's so crucial. Nick, thanks so much for giving us the up-to-date today, and really appreciate you dialing in. And so we'll look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks again.
Thanks, Richard. Cheers. Thanks. Bye.
Bye now.